Hey everyone, this is going to be a different kind of video today. I wanted to pull back the curtain a bit to show off how I actually made the evolving URSHIFU animation. I think that's the name of it. The title I worked under was Borrow Pokemon. And that's just sort of how I refer to the whole fucking mess in my head. I think I wanted that to be the final title, but I thought it was a bit much, and I was afraid people would get a weird feeling from it. More so than I wanted them to. Anyways, I'm just going to talk about the different programs I use, sort of my workflow process, and then I'll go through the animation and we can talk about individual scenes and shit like that. It'll be super entertaining, and I can milk this shit for all it's worth. Anyway, my main animation program is CSP, Clip Studio Paint EX. That's the EX version, the most expensive version that has the unlocked animation limit, so you can make animations as long as you want. And I abuse that by making like -16 to, it goes about to 90 there, so that's like 106 seconds, which is, there's probably someone screaming out there now. I think it's obvious to me now that you're supposed to really split projects like this up into multiple segments, so it doesn't, for one, it doesn't take a minute to load in the program or the project every time, and sort of the file, if it became corrupt or something, you wouldn't lose the whole thing. I don't see people like using CSP. I also don't really like pay attention to what programs people are using. All I've ever seen is Toon Boom and Krita, I don't know how it's pronounced, and some stuff. Some Apple iPad thing as well, if I can remember correctly. But CSP is much more of a just drawing program. You know, you got the tool thing there, layers, a billion brushes that don't fucking matter. And it's good as that. It's a perfectly fine drawing program. I use it for all of my illustration work, and it's works fine for me. I enjoy it quite a bit. But the animation capabilities feel pretty tacked on. It feels like that was something they just sort of pushed out for people to do, like little GIFs and loops and shit like that. It's not really built for multiple minute long animations. It also does not take audio very well. You can drag audio in and it'll play while your stuff's moving up here, and it'll look all fine and dandy or whatever, but it'll also get very, very crashy when you do that, and I don't like my programs crashing, so I don't put audio here. I use a different program. I use my video editor, and hopefully this will work, and there we go. Yes, my video editor I use is DaVinci Resolve. It is a free program. It is a very good program from what I've seen. Its preview while editing is very, very good. It is very stable. It's got a bunch of different like workflow frames down here you can use. And altogether, it is a hell of a lot better than Power Director, which was what I was using before. Power Director is a crashy piece of crap. I don't recommend it if you are planning to use any type of video editor. And yeah, I wasted $50 on Power Director. I think for paid programs like that, you're mostly paying for a bunch of like library special effects and things like that, which I'm not really going to use. I'm not a video editor. I don't do fancy stuff like that. So if you're just looking to put audio over something, I recommend DaVinci Resolve if you're going to do that. It's a great program. What else? The only other thing I use is Audacity to record audio like I'm doing right now. And that's pretty much every program I use. And now on to the workflow. I remember to pull this up this time. We'll just hide that. Normally I do everything on my tablet, but recording requires me to use my dual monitors. But like anything, you need a storyboard to sort of plan things out and things like that. If I wanted to be super technical, I'd probably pull up the original Notepad document I used to sort of jot down ideas in, but I could not find it, so this is what we have. But like everything, the idea originally started, let's see, I didn't watch the Nintendo Direct where they revealed URSHIFU and Calyrex. That's the big brain thing that I used in the other animation. But after I saw that, I decided, you know what, I want to make something stupid and small and silly, so I made the Calyrex animation. Just to work it out. And I think I went into that wanting to sort of practice doing like an idle animation. But eventually I was like, I just decided to have fun with it, and I abused the poor thing with a spoon, and apparently people thought that was really funny, so that was good. But I wanted to do something else. I'd gotten off the Dark Souls animation, and that was sort of that got a much bigger reception than I thought, so I was sort of pumped and slightly anxiously motivated, I don't know how else to describe it, to do something else really quickly. So I think right after I uploaded the Calyrex animation, the next day I started working on this. And for storyboards, the idea is speed, to just sort of get down what's happening. I don't know industry standard ways to sort of how you're supposed to break these things down and what sort of formats and rules they have. But for me, I think about it as scenes. And then in the scenes, stuff's happening, and I'll if like for Kubfu, for instance, here he's turning, so I mark that for 1, and I'm like, 1, Kubfu turns around. 2, trainer approves. That's where she gives a thumbs up. 3, Kubfu bounces up happily and stuff like that. And I'll write down notes like basic bird Pokemon, because I just drew some birds there to show that he'd beaten them up and stuff. And all that happens, and then I do over here, and Kubfu glows and starts to evolve, and 2, trainer shocked. And there's no like background transition, there's no real scene transition, but I don't want to just clutter up one thing with a million different stages of how that scene's going to go, so I break it up into this one. I think that's why I did this equal marks here, just so it's a continuation of that scene. And then as you go forward, you just have more scenes, and as everything changes, you make new panels and you go into those. And I need my keyboard. I'm having to hold this really awkwardly. And you go forward marking stuff. Honestly, you don't really need to be concerned with how big horny. You don't need to be concerned about how this is all working out, just as long as you can get your ideas out of your head and you can sort of visualize what you want happening. And as your ideas come out, you can change them, you can alter them. And that's why it's set up like this, so you can... traditionally probably they had I don't know what you'd call them, but like note cards or something. And they would be able to move those around and sort of alter scenes. That's not really a concern of mine, because I'm not going to be doing anything over that's like 2 or 3 minutes. But they can just get an idea of what they want to do in their storyboard, and without actually having to go and animate everything out. Because if you have a bunch of polished, clean work and you're trying to piece it all together, you're going to end up with a lot of stuff that ends up on the cutting floor, which is just wasted time and effort. So you want a really clear idea of what you want to do before you actually do it. And that's what the storyboarding process is for. And this whole stage is, you can lump it together with a lot of other things as well. Let's close some things here, and we'll look at this. This is the Animatic. right here. I probably should blow it up to the actual portions I want to use it as. But I take all my individual storyboard frames and whatever. I will put them into an animatic. And I probably have some things turned off down in there so you can't see it all. Probably the frames themselves are turned off. Can increase opacity though. But you can see I put that in there, and then I'll go back through and animate little parts of it, add things as well. I guess I never did do that. You can add things well. I did have some little doodles for the sky backdrop. But that's just, you can just go in and add things, change things around, switch them around. Here I'm just timing everything out, trying to basically make the movie in the quickest way possible without actually having to make it. We have the transformation scene. Pops out. I don't know why a lot of these frames are off. Probably just did them. Have that. Zoom out. And he falls back down into his pose. And I'll do things like that. I think I keep it small to avoid to limit myself in how much detail I can go into, because I can look over and look at my brush size, and if it's under like 10 or so, I'm thinking, okay, that's way too much. You can also do some tween effects here and there to quickly animate something if you want. This is just rough. No one's supposed to see this unless they make a video showing how they did it, like I'm doing right now. But you can be as rough as you want. You can do this. You can go back to your storyboard and add more things, take things out. Just you want to go over your animatic, your storyboard as much as possible to really nail down and to really get an idea of everything you want to do. I believe most other programs, they do have the ability to put sound in here, and they'll have like an animatic with sound in the same program. I have to, as I said before, I have to use another program because CSP will just shit the bed if I try to put audio in there. It really will. And I don't have it in here anymore, but I did used to have the original animatic in here, and I would cut it up, splice it up, and as I needed to while I was doing all the sound design. The sound design for it. And it's not as you would imagine it would be difficult, but it's actually fairly easy. Because since I'm working with such simple drawings and simple things, and I can sort of edit it here as well. And I can set the timing to this whole thing to be 24 frames a second. So you can see that gets to like 23 before it loops over to 24. So each little movement I make here corresponds to a movement in CSP. So I can just memorize the numbers and edit it that way. The only difficulty is doing dialogue, because it's very hard to... It'd be very tedious, rather, to time all like the mouth flaps and the mouth movements for a lot of dialogue while bouncing back and forth between two programs, because I'd have to either edit here and end up with something super choppy, then go back here into CSP and clean it up, or what I did was I sort of just eyeball it in CSP, throw it over here into DaVinci to test it, and then I make adjustments as I need to. That's why Incineroar here, he just says his name. He doesn't have any like actually complicated dialogue, and there's only 2 or 3 there's 3 sort of dialogue moments, which is just very short segments where they're just saying their name, as Pokemon are ought to do. But doing dialogue is probably the biggest reason why I would switch to a new program, because having a stable program that can accept audio is so important if you're trying to do dialogue. And if you're wanting to look at different types of animations that require dialogue, like any sort of script-based humor, or if you're doing a Let's Play animated or something like that, you're going to be working with a shit ton of dialogue, and my methods now are not going to be sufficient for doing that if I want to do those sorts of things. So I'd have to move on to something else. But this whole process is just a giant back and forth. You know, even without how stupidly I do it. That bouncing back and forth between the storyboard, the animatic, and the sound design, and you're basically making your movie as rough as possible. That's sort of your goal. And then once you get that down, and you have it polished and you like it, or at least you think you like it, you can go and you can start actually working on it. Now, for me, I decided early on that I was just going to break this down into scenes, and then I would work on each scene, completely complete an entire scene, or at least get to a point where I'm like, this is final, barring any sort of changes I make in the future. And then I'd move on to the next scene. For the Dark Souls animation, Guinevere, High Priestess, Son, Mom, whatever, I was all over the place. I think after I did like the animatic, I went through and I did roughs here and there. I did clean lines here and there. I did sound design a little bit each day. I did colors here and there. I did backgrounds here and there. And I was all over the place. And I can't really quantify how much time that wasted. But I definitely think I could have gotten done with that a week or two earlier than what I did. For this one, the idea and the whole project was much more complicated. And I was also at the time doing a ton of other work on the side. So I had about 3 days a week to work on this. So that 3 months of work is really more like, it's more akin to how long the Dark Souls animation took. Maybe a little less, in all seriousness, but this last month, April, I put everything else on hold and I worked on this every day until I got done for about 2 weeks. So that was probably like a month's work beforehand, equivalent to that. But for each scene, I go in and I'll have the rough sort of animatic laid out or whatever, and I'll reuse those. I'll just take those in and blow them up here or find them down on top of other layers. But I'll typically do sort of a rough pass on how much animation I need. Like for this particular one, the opening here. I went, and I don't know if I still have this. I might not. Down in here? Yes. There we go. See there, I have a bird sketch at a very low opacity. But I'll do a rough pass of all the sketch. And then if it's a complicated design like URSHIFU or the trainer Gloria, that's her, I think, canonical name in the games. I could end up doing another one if I don't feel confident in my sketch, and I usually don't. And on top of that, I'll do the cleanest lines I can. This is all raster, meaning it's not vector. Meaning raster is what you see is what you get, you know, what you've drawn at the resolution you've drawn it at is what it is. With vector, you can scale up and down, and then since it's the lines stored essentially as a math equation, you can scale it up and down without getting any sort of blurry mess noise nonsense to it. But after lines, obviously, comes colors. And it's not necessary for me to do the background before or after. Occasionally, sometimes it's just good enough to have the background there roughed out so I can sort of see how my characters need to animate in that particular scene. Other times I'll fully do the background and then just knock it back down to a really low opacity so I can still see it, but it's not really adding too much visual noise to the screen as I'm working on it. But I do that, and then I go through and just anything else where I need something like these clouds moving, I'll add a tween to those on that layer. This white-in effect, stuff like that, I'll add. But the main bulk of it is actually doing the background and then doing all the animation in it. For this particular scene, scene 1, the first one I did, I started it. I don't know when, but I know it was basically done towards the end of the week of the first week of February, 2020. So that was many, many months ago in a different world, it seems like. Thoughts on this? I liked it. That's what I'll say. I liked it. I thought the birds flying off was pretty interesting. Let's see how well this plays back. Oh God. Let's go through it again. There's some playback the best. There's some frame skipping there because there's so much happening. Typically, if you go to window and do a new window, drag that out, and throw that on a completely different monitor, as you can't see I'm doing right now, it will play back cleaner for some reason. I have no clue why. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes if you leave the program open for too long, it gets the same sort of frame skipping effect that you have in the main sort of windowed program. There's not much here. The blur effect here was I took a screenshot, I exported this entire thing, like what the clouds were, everything, all the layers. And then I went back and hand blurred all the frames to do a wipe. I think it looks okay, to be honest. I mean, it doesn't look bad, I didn't throw up in my mouth when I saw it. I thought it was clever, at least. But this scene was not extremely complicated at all. I determined sort of like my background visual style in this scene, and I refined it more into this scene. I'm not quite a fan of the background style anymore. I much more preferred it in the beginning. But after I had to draw like 5 or 6 backgrounds of this same thing, it got very, very annoying. And my love of it quickly turned to naught. Let's move on to the next one. What's this one? The after battle scene. This one was very complicated, because there was 2 figures I had to animate. I underestimated how complicated that would be. I quite like how Kubfu's little animation there turned out. It looks fairly smooth. Pretty good. Like that, his little pop-up there could be better. Gloria's thumbs up here originally was like, I think it was just 2 frames. And then in sort of my last day of working, I was like, that looks so terrible. I can't do that. So I think I added a few more frames to it. It still doesn't look the best. And that's because that if you're animating someone and you just animate a piece of them, it will look weird unless you frame it in such a way to where them being still is sort of, it works with it. You know, like an example would be like something very stark and still, and then there's just a small animation of like an arm moving, you know, to place something in someone's hand. You know, it means something. So for here, what you would do, and this is a very stupid time-wasting thing to do, but you would need to go back and basically redraw all of this to sort of make it make sense, make it look appealing, but that's a complete waste. And this works completely fine. Don't listen to me on that. But that's just my own personal preference. And you can see up here is where she moves full body. She has that little jerk back, that little reaction to when her beloved Pokemon lights on fire. I don't think I was originally intending to do the jerk back as like an actual animation. So I remember that was one of the many times in the project where I was like, man, this is taking way too long. And that's because you've added a bunch of shit you don't need. These sort of animations here, what you want to do is, and I'm not an animator myself. I just have the sort of personality and skill set which sort of lets me know how something's supposed to look. I just don't know the most efficient way to do it. So I will just sit there and work on it until it gets done, which results in many, many hours of frustration usually. And usually means that you're supposed to sit down and actually practice on many simpler things before you attempt something complicated like this. But this was back when I still had a lot. I should have put a ground shadow underneath him. But this was back when I had you could say I was more starry-eyed about the project. I remember looking at a lot of this animation I was doing and having a lot of fun doing it. Thought it looked really good. Had a lot of fun with it. I got to draw lots of weird-looking fucking frames. Weird in-betweens are always fun. And I think that's a bit all for that scene. The next one is the transformation scene. Where's that start? Oh, right there. This one was a lot simpler. A hell of a lot simpler. The background is like a 6,000 width canvas that I put a bunch of really, really long lines on. And I chopped it up and looped it in like looped each segment of that huge background together so the lines have like a continuous start and end. So they sort of look like that they are flying past each other like that, and then it just loops at some point, but you can't tell where it does. In a lot of anime I've seen that usually like when someone's getting like blasted away, like in DBZ or something like that, they'll do like a white fill for the body with all the lines drawn, like in a sketchy loose style, and they're super erratic and all over the place to show that he's like slowly being disintegrated or something like that. And that's what I was going for here. It's probably one of my favorite scenes in the thing because it looks pretty good, you know. The transformation here could be better because it looks like he's giant, and then he suddenly goes like this. I think it would have been better if I went in there, and on these frames right here, he got really tiny, really, really tiny, and then sort of popped back up into this size. I think that would have looked a little bit better. That looks like a penis. You can see there, I used that flash to hide the fact that I didn't really animate him popping out. For really fast in-betweens on something that was like it's going to be on screen for 2 frames, which means it's going to be on screen for a 1/12 of a second. You can do some really stupid stuff. You're going to probably hear me say that a lot, but you really only have to sort of show where things are moving. There are many times where you'll be drawing an in-between, and it will feel wrong to draw it because you'll be looking at it and it'll be this misshapen, broken thing, but in motion it works. And if you just gotta lean into that and sort of enjoy how stupid it is. But I hid the pop-up with that, and he pops out into this. This text right here was a late addition at the time. It was in the original storyboard, but I felt like there needed to be a slowdown here to sort of let the audience sort of like, oh, okay, he evolved, and just like it's sort of a lull moment where they sort of can reaffirm to themselves everything they've just seen. Like, they're okay, he leveled up, we get that. I think I added too many of those throughout the animation though, and I think I was more impressed of how sort of long the animation was getting. I was like, I've got a minute of animation. I've got a minute and a half. I've got 2 minutes of animation. And it's all being padded out by me just doing nothing or doing little things like this. This is the Pokemon X and Y font, I think. I think that's where I downloaded it from. I don't think there's much else to say there. The background went through a few color revisions. I think this was originally red, or this was originally blue, I think. I can't remember. This was months ago. But at this point, I'm still feeling good. I'm still feeling good about the animation. And the epic URSHIFU scene is where my optimism began fading away, because I realized that URSHIFU is a complicated design, especially when you draw him as detailed and muscular as I did. Because it's actually very hard to animate all of that. A lot of times what I end up doing with these sorts of things is I'll end up sort of not tweening, but I'll trace what I've already drawn and reuse that as much as I can. Like his forearm that's horizontal there, I probably traced that throughout the entire animation because it doesn't really shift or move. His other arm does though. Like that, and there's that weird in between where his arm's super long. And then it pops back into place and he has a bunch of reactions to it. You can see his pupil link off there is still reacting to it. Probably should have reacted a bit longer. Kept swaying to show that there was more energy to it. Actually, that looks fine. I'm reevaluating my work. The opening right here originally didn't have that pop-up from all this stuff right there. I think originally I was going to have some sort of like Caterpie or something. One of those small insect Pokemon sort of inching its way along here. Then URSHIFU stomps the absolute shit out of it as a joke. But I was unsure when I should start introducing jokes into the pacing of the animation. I think actually, yeah, when we were doing the text thing, I think the first joke I wanted was that the text begins writing your Kubvu evolved into some sort of buff Bara thing, and then it sort of untypes that, it backspaces a bunch, and writes out the actual thing. But I was thinking to myself, okay, I don't need any jokes until I get to the reveal. That's a good zoom out frame, isn't it? Very incredibly fast leg. Until we get to the reveal that she is the trainer here is got ulterior motives for our poor URSHIFU here. Which, that's a running sort of problem I discovered that is inherent to the entire animation itself. Which is that, I'll talk about that later, to be honest. But this is where I was like, oh my god, I'm going to have to animate this dumbass all over the place. And look at that torso stretch I did. Here I did a lot of like cheating, sort of like there. I selected all the lines and just skewed them a bit to show that it was moving. That actually wouldn't have been hard to redraw, but I was being lazy. Additionally, I should have mentioned this before, but his bandana animation, I had to do that 4 or 5 times of it just flapping in the wind. And the last one I did, where he's in his pose where you can just see it from the torso up, that was the last one I did because I was like, I'm just going to reuse this animation for the rest of the animation itself, because I got tired of redoing it over and over and over again. Just reuse it, repose it. And we see our URSHIFU there now notices that something's amiss in the force. Now we have the scene where things get creepy. I'm not particularly well versed in drawing people, especially not girls and stuff. Human girls, at least. That's telling. I shouldn't have said that. Let's just say my skill set lies elsewhere. But Gloria's design, I think, is okay. It's something I have such a little knowledge in. I'm just like, well, it looks good enough to me. It works. Then we have these tween in. I added the sweat towards the end because I was like, let's push this part. Let's make this part sort of creepy. You can see she's filled with young certain kind of lust. And then we have that very suspicious end scene that stops just before you see anything. And we'll not just reveal if anything's down there. Let's do that. Just move on to that. Nothing else to say there, I guess. And then we have the first of this pose URSHIFU's in. And I think he's got 3 or 4 scenes where he's in this exact pose. And it was something when I was like, do I just keep copying over this and changing it? And I think what I ended up doing was had to do a lot of subtle animation where he didn't really change like how he was standing. He just shifts a little bit. You can probably just do that with a tween. You don't need to draw individual frames. These fucking lat muscle moves weirdly. I can't talk. But this is a problem I have. Some of these animations are so complex that instead of doing anything wild or crazy, I kept doing really subtle animations like that. I think it works there. I think this is one of the best of them. But there's a lot of times where I was like, man, I really don't want to have to animate like Gloria moving or doing a backflip or URSHIFU doing something weird. I think I eventually had to do it, as we will see later. But it's something I definitely learned here, that maybe choose simpler designs. Even though I don't think it would have worked unless I really sort of had something that had a lot of fidelity in it. Because, I mean, the point of it is that URSHIFU is oddly masculine and buff, is the joke. And I was afraid a lot of people wouldn't get this joke. I don't know if it's something to get. It's something it's sort of it's making fun of all the sort of pushed sexy feminine Pokemon like Slazzle and Gardevoir or something like that. Even though Gardevoir is not really pushed. And again, Slazzle's not really pushed, but there are Pokemon in there that are like, you look at them and they're like, I know exactly what kind of fan art's going to be made of this Pokemon. I know exactly how this Pokemon's going to be viewed by the fandom, you could say. And this was me sort of flipping it on its head because everyone makes fun of the feminine Pokemon, you know. They were doing it back in, I remember, way long ago on Newgrounds, there was the Super Nintendo collab that had a bit making fun of Pokemon Snap. And the joke was that all the Pokemon were over-sexualized and anthropomorphic, and I don't think they really picked any certain ones. It was just whatever they could get, whatever they wanted to draw, I guess, the artist who drew that. But they were all like bikini models and stuff like that, and the joke was that, you know, you took pictures of them and it was perverted and stupid, as most things on Newgrounds are. And then Plague of Gripes did his, where he was talking about very weird breeding things. But my idea here was to sort of like, you know, there's another side to that. You know, there's lots of overly masculine Pokemon that appeal to a certain different crowd. Maybe not exactly women, but I felt it would have been really weird to draw like a young boy fawning over muscular Pokemon. That would have been an entirely different, very weird, unsubtle tone, which is probably why I never considered doing it in the first place. But I think we've seen enough of this. There's not much else to say here. That's the animation I reused 40 million times, the Bandana Animation there. And we'll see more of that. Then we have Horny Throw. That's an excellent name I gave it. Open that up. I don't like this particular scene. I don't like that animation. I don't like that. I don't like her pulling it up. Her throwing it up is probably the best one because it works even though it's a very unsubtle transition. It's one frame. She looks like a fucking idiot. They shows it up like that. But with a lot of animation, you could get away with, you see how she crouches down? If I had maybe a few more frames, like 2 or 3 more, that shows her like beginning to crouching like to about here, then one more subtler crouch, and then maybe one more build up, I could really sell that this pop frame right here goes up here, and it'd probably sell a lot better. You could see it a lot more. Here I animated her hair slowly falling down, like there's a slow down here. I'm not quite sure why I thought that was a good idea. I mean, I sort of have seen it before, but I don't really understand the purpose of it. You can also see her bag here is sort of freeze framed, even though her hair isn't. That doesn't make much sense now, does it? But that shuffle frame, that was I definitely did that and made that decision to do it that way when I was not in a particularly good mood. And I did not care about how it looked. I'm not here to sort of like point out all my flaws that I did. That's what my thoughts are, and I just want to share them with y'all. This is the behind the scenes scoop. This is definitely one of the weaker ones. I had a lot of sort of like, do I do this? Do I do that? How do I sell this? You know, she has like her weird eye twitch and things like that, and she's got the mouth drool. I don't know, like if you like go to try to sort of draw all like the anime tropes of like, you know, the squiggly lines for angry, the lines over the brow if they're like depressed or sad or whatever, you start to sort of lose like the symbology of those, and they start not to make sense to you anymore. You're like, why is this way? Why does like a bunch of lines over the face indicate this certain emotion? And to me, it feels like that it's just because so many people have done that before is why we think of it and we associate it with those certain emotions. We've just seen it so many times before and we don't really think about it. But once you start to think about it, it almost instantly breaks that bond. It's like saying a word too much. You sit there and say a word like 40 times, the word loses all meaning and it just becomes this spew of syllables. You're like, oh God, that's terrifying. I'm losing association with this word. And that's what I feel like happens a lot if I ever try to draw in an anime style. It's like, how am I supposed to make this work? There's an incredibly bad transition in there. I'm not going to point it out anymore because I'm tired of looking at that. Now let's go to Pokeball Flash. This was a nice break. This particular segment right here. Because it wasn't a human. It wasn't anything. It was Pokeballs. I remember I put this up on my Twitter, a little snip of this. We have the 4 Pokeballs indicated by our team of 4. Wait. Yeah, 4. Yeah. I almost thought I messed up there for a second, but there's the Incineroar, the Machamp, the Obstagoon, and the Buzzwole. And URSHIFU's in his own Pokeball, and he's already out. Okay. Brain fart. Like this. This was an enjoyable break. You just animate some balls. If you ever get tired of animating, you get drugged down by complicated designs or how you're supposed to do something freehand, just animate some balls. Animating balls is so fun. You can squash and stretch them and spin them around. Look at that squash and stretch on that black one right there. He's like, like that. And after that, I didn't want to do anything more complicated with the light busting out, so I instantly faded away so you can't see me stop animating that. And we transitioned to something else. One more thing I'll say is that I intentionally put them all on different timings. This one pops up, reaches its apex, then the Ultra Ball reaches its apex. Then I think this is a Luxury Ball. Apex. And I think these two are on the same timing. Are they? I think they are, yeah. And they open at different times and stuff like that. If they all opened at once, you would instantly recognize that, like, oh, a bunch of things happened in unison. Your brain picks up on those sorts of things. Then URSHIFU realizes, and we fade out of that flash. So here, I like the line art on this one. I trace back over the other pose, and this is where I think I found good pen settings and sort of sizes. There's a weird error there. Huh. I hope that's not in the animation. It's probably not. When this is on your canvas, selecting down here in a certain frame, oftentimes you'll select and do a little slide, which will very easily move it, which is very annoying. Probably need to find a way to fix that. But that happens all the time, so I end up moving my frames by accident all the time. I think I like this more because it's an actual animation. It's like there's something that moves on screen, and that's what I like doing, even if it's a bitch. If you go down to the nitty gritty of it, you're going to see some weird movements. Like that black area in his armpit disappears. And sort of that black part of his shoulder, the thing that spikes out of the pec. This thing is sort of just, it feels like it just appears. after the bicep moves down. But once, I mean, if you got your sort of keyframes here looking good, and what's in between them doesn't really matter. It does, because that's what animation is. But even if you get close, you still get sort of magic of something moving on screen, which is what I like. But you can see how all my lines are moving around in sometimes weird ways. And that's because even if you think to yourself, oh, you just move it in the direction you're supposed to go, it's still, a lot of times there's just so many of them. And you even have to sit down and robot through it of just like move this line, move this line, move this line, or you try to quickly get it out of the way. It's just a polishing thing. And hopefully as you continue to do these types of animations, you'll get better. I'm sort of talking to myself too, you know. Give myself a pep talk. It's probably sounding annoying, so I'll quit. Next one was the big scene. The big reveal that not everything is as it seems to be. But this is where I'm using the actual camera to pan things up and down. The whole image isn't moving. The camera's moving up, and I have it set so the actual view is moving along as well. I can change that. There, so there you can see, I don't know if you can see that through all the noise, but you can see that camera moving up. And that's what actually is happening. We're panning up to see her other victims, I guess. This was also a fun time doing this because this was just like a figure in a pose, a figure in a pose, and then the obstagoon was literally just 2 frames of pulling and not pulling. And the way you animate that, how I animated that, really sold how that looked. Because it looks like he is sort of struggling against it, because I've got everything on different, he's pulling at different intervals. Sometimes he pulls longer, sometimes he pulls less, and I also have sound as well going off at different times. It's sort of grunting and frustration. And that's a good example of doing more with less. You know, because you can't, like, I can't animate him doing a struggle like on like 4, 5 or 6 frames. That would have already extended this very long scene, comparatively long scene, to even greater lengths. And the longer a scene goes, the sort of less polish I put into it, invariably. My only regret is not going through and actually redrawing this, because we'll swap over to this real quick. Because here, and we will you see here, and it's much more apparent once I blow it up to full size, but you can see, actually, there we go. You can see here that a lot of this is obviously blown up, and it does not look very good compared to its native resolution here. And it occurs to me now that here, on its where it's especially egregious, because here it's not as bad, it's not good, and I should have gone back and just redrawn all of that for a close-up, but that's a very, very polishy thing that was completely unnecessary, so I just threw it on the nope pile. But here I could have just easily gone back and replaced his line art here with the new line art here and just redraw the scary, frightened eyes. This scene took a long time. but it was fairly fun to work on, actually. Let's go back a bit. Incineroar is a big sort of offender here in the pushed Pokemon design category. Now, obviously, I have pushed it quite a bit myself here. If you look like an actual Incineroar, it has like the shape of like a big hulky fighter, but it doesn't really. It's not like, it doesn't have definition and tone. It doesn't have shorts. I don't know why, but it's still got a little bit of that there, but not enough to really sort of really mean anything unless you're one of the types of people who sort of go looking for that sort of stuff. Machamp is as well, but Machamp looks so stupid. Is Machamp? Yeah, it's Machamp. Machamp looks so stupid with his face that you don't really get that feeling from him, even though he's technically wearing a Speedo with a suspicious bulge. I should make that the thumbnail of the video. Obstagoon was the one I took the most liberties with because he really does not look like that at all, aside from the head and the design. But, you know, gotta have fun where we can. Don't read any more into that. Unnecessary serious stuff. Notice that the text box here is completely off of where the camera is, and that's because the text box, which is down here, it's not in the camera's folder. And typically for this sort of stuff, the camera, anything in the camera's transform folder is going to be, when you render it out, it's going to only render out what's in the camera's sort of box, and everything out is going to render however you see it. So if I drag, the Incineroar close up, Gloria's there and well, doing her little breathing animation, and all these guys back here, and the background as well. Since that's all in this folder, and I usually put it in another camera wrap folder so I can just move everything at once into the camera folder without having to drag everything I want in the camera folder in there. So it'll all only display that. And that's how I deal with that. But this was a fun scene. This is sort of where like one of the few other jokes in the animation comes from. Because it's like one large joke is the fact that this trainer, Gloria, has, assembled a certain collection of Pokemon that all have sort of similar traits. And she sort of, enforces some weird clothing for them to wear. It's a bunch of vague sort of weird things that you look at and go, that's sort of weird. I'm like, that's the point it's supposed to be. It's supposed to sort of mean all these things. And if you sit there and be like, I don't like how I feel, it's like, well, that means you're just sort of more normal than anyone else, or maybe not normal enough. You're in that weird state where you can't go full degenerate, but you sort of recognize it, that hell state. And then we have yet another scene of URSHIFU in that same exact pose. And there we have the Baroness crouching, and he looks up. The shadow fade was something I added real late, and it sells the shot a lot better, I think. It's real funny. His head turn up is like not good, because that's just, it looks weird to me. That final keyframe. This looks fine. And I think it's because his sort of beak muzzle grows a lot bigger or something. There's certain poses that if people take them, they just look weird because people don't look at people in those poses very often. So even though you could get it anatomically correct as you can, just because people don't see that pose a lot, it'll still sort of not read correctly. It's like when you try to foreshorten someone's arm, because no one really looks at an arm in that position. I'm talking about like you hold your palm up to their face and they look down your arm towards your shoulder. It's going to look very weird, but just because you don't see that very often. My voice is starting to fade. I better wrap this up as quickly as I can. But there's that scene. Not the best scene. Not the best scene. Now this is the best scene. the Buzz Swole himself. Let's see. This was not in the original animatic. I think the whole joke was URSHIFU sees that this little girl has collected a harem of buff Pokemon. And he's like, oh my god. And he's like looking at each one of them like, oh god, what's fuck. And then while he's distracted, she slaps a Speedo in his hand. He's like, oh no. And then I think I just originally had it like, it ends like this. Like I'm just a silent, like they're just standing there and he's like sort of, he goes to like smile like really nervously like, oh, okay. Obviously I've changed it a lot. There's a lot of feature creep. A lot of feature creep. You should avoid that whenever possible. I just remembered that this is an unfinished version and I actually animated this into a completely different file. We'll just, I don't want to open that. So we'll just bop over here. The sound's off, yes. You see, just here, this guy was not going to animate at all. I knew that from the very beginning. So I could go and do full shading, a bunch of post effects and stuff like that to really sell this shot. It's still daytime, but I made it like, I gave it like everything a devil red glow because it was supposed to be very menacing and shit like that. And then one of the few other jokes is how he just sort of cracks that like that. I don't know if that really counts as a joke, but that always sold the shot really well to me. It's not playing very well. It's probably because I've got this preview thing too big. Still not playing very well. But him crushing that's funny to me. I don't know why. Crushing things is funny, I guess. There's also a much subtler joke here that I don't know if anyone picked up on, but he does have 4 bulges. You know, whatever that means to you, just take it as is, you know. But that is another joke. And we're getting towards the end here. I'm just going to go ahead and bop this all the way out to the end. About so. And here we have probably one of the biggest, most egregious feature creeps in the entire animation. Oh yeah, this is also not displaying correctly. Yeah, it is actually. The blue box right here is what was actually rendered out. I had a huge problem here because in my storyboard, you see I am zoomed in much closer on URSHIFU, which I should have done perhaps, but as you can see here, the framing he is in, there's action going on down here. And when she puts this in his hand, it's going to be down here. So I have to extend the frame down here to capture everything. But I'm stuck at a certain aspect ratio, so I have to extend out to here. So to sort of do that scene, I had to actually include Gloria in the scene, giving it to him. And as before, it was just supposed to be her arms. But I can't do anything simply, so on top of that, let's see, this is all animated on 2s, except for this last part here. This took like an entire weekend to do because I'm not an animator. This stuff is really slow to me. It's not playing back correctly, unfortunately, so you can't see it. I can do this, however. Step through it. This is a very funny keyframe because all I could think about in my mind was La Goblina gives. I kept calling it the Goblin frame. I don't know why. But she leaps in, grabs his hand. You see she's like still, her head and body is still sort of moving like that. Comes in, She bops back because her body's the momentum of her leaping in causes her to lean forward. She goes back to correct. She's correcting like that. Had to redo that hair a lot. Didn't look good. Her neck sort of disappeared. Her neck moved there. That's weird. But notice URSHIFU barely animates. His arm only animates in that. So what was supposed to be an extremely simple scene took days longer because I wanted to do the best animation I could of Gloria whipping in to like slam a Speedo into his fucking hand because I'm stupid. Alasky doesn't even look that good. Pushing the wrong button every time. I'm having to use my keyboard behind myself. I think that was a keyframe. I think the motion's pretty good. This when she's moving up, and these anticipation frames. Up, anticipation, anticipation, anticipation. Just boom, no in between, no nothing. But those anticipation frames really sell that movement, which is so weird to think of how frames that aren't even a part of the animation can contribute to a specific movement, can contribute to other things. It's very interesting to me that those sorts of things can happen. Like that, and he slowly looks down. He's beginning to grow very afraid. Okay, I had a few more scenes than I thought. Let's close that. URSHIFU's gift. This was a very fun scene to work on because it was just that hand for a very long time. And then I added the text here because I thought of this while working on it, and I was like, that's a good joke, and I need more jokes in this. Need more jokes in that, but that's basically all that is. We don't need to linger on that. That didn't even get a true scene number. It's 3.2. Here's another instance of absurd feature creep caused by my own idiocy, you could say. We can't see this in the storyboard. Let's see if I can pull up the work. There we go. See if I can go through this. His arm drops. Let's zoom in so y'all can see, actually. She motions for him to put it on. You know, like, go ahead. He's smiling. And then he's supposed to, let's see. I don't have that for, yeah, okay, I do. He's supposed to run this way. That thing holds there. Stuff like that. Incineroar face palms. But he's supposed to run off camera. Now, I didn't do that. Our Incineroar does not run off camera. Our URSHIFU does not run off camera. Our URSHIFU runs away. You know why I had to do that? It was because of how I originally placed everything. I can't show it over here, so we'll bob back over here. I don't want to go back to the old frame or old scene because I'd have to dig it up. But you see, she's standing on this side, he's standing on this side. He's standing on this side, his back is still against this line of trees. As it was before, he's moved backwards a bit more than he should have probably. But she's still standing on the other side. She's still where she is. They're still in their sort of positions throughout the entire thing. And when we get to this scene where he's supposed to run away, I can't have him running off into the forest when the punchline is him off in the distance getting orbital striked by a buzzswole. So I had to animate all of that of him running away because I did not plan my storyboard out well enough. So again, that's why I was saying before that you really need to nail down what your storyboard is before you commit to it. Look at it from many different angles. Show it to people, Say, can you see any inconsistencies? Are there any plot holes? And that's how I had to do it. And then again, this was a pretty long scene because we have multiple figures animating. The running away animation doesn't look amazing. I think it's because there's not a good in between here. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, it's not the best because there's a lot of information from this to that, this to that. These two right here. There's a lot of information that your brain has to sort of come up with. This is fine. Your brain can interpolate these two things. It can't interpolate those two things. But this was like the final 2 weeks. So I was just like, shit has to get done. There's a but. But for this, I think I animated starting here, I think I did 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I would just continually copy and paste those frames, shrinking them down and redrawing the shrink, which is why it sort of looks weird. It looks like animation runs I've seen in like other things, so it makes me think that other people have solved the problem of a figure running away by just tracing over like the same 4 frames over and over, but at smaller and smaller resolutions. So I feel kindred that way, I guess. He did it, so I can do it there too. Gloria's animation there is nice. It's probably because I do the anticipation. Little thing drops. I almost forgot about that little thing. Cinnaror has a very subtle animation. I think he begins turning a little bit before. Yeah, I probably need to time that better. Okay, we're almost done. Where are we? This was a fun one. Because it's one of those ones where I'm like, oh, Gloria just, snaps her finger and this thing brushes past her, but it's amazing how complicated I can make these things, especially when it's something like this, because I'm like, oh, it's so simple. I can add this to it. I can add this to it. I can add this to it. And then towards the end, I'm like, I tripled the difficulty of this by just adding things to it. And Cinnaror was originally not in this scene, but I felt the need to add him because he's effectively behind her, and you're supposed to be able to see him. And if you can't see him, it's like, oh, why did he move? But in reality, most people aren't going to care. But I decided it would have been funny if he got his shit knocked in by a buzzswole flying past. I don't know how obvious it is as buzzswole flying past, because buzzwole's supposed to be back here behind them all, and Machamp's supposed to be somewhere behind him, but I didn't include those, so it's really all about just like what I want this scene to say is like, we see she's like, oh, he ran away, and we see this very slow facial transition. It's not slow, but it's very smooth. It's like, oh, okay, we're gonna have to do this again. Someone doesn't learn. Like that, and then joke here is he gets his shit knocked in. Big swoop of buzzswole. The buzzswole swoop is like nothing. That's what it is. It's just a fucking blur. It was fun doing the wind effects, though. few more. My voice is really going. I wasn't meant to talk this long. Okay, and you see out here he's doing the Running Man, and boom. I don't like that explosion animation, but I think this was like one of the last days I was working on stuff, and I was like, okay, well, this is just how it's going to look, and I don't care. Very slow wind pushing that dust cloud away. I had like 2 videos of explosion effects on YouTube, both looping in my other window, and I just kept looking over them as I was animating this, trying to sort of emulate what an explosion was while copying how like people traditionally have seen explosions, which for me, I just think of like explosions in animes, you know, like dust clouds and things like that. That's what I think about. Then we see her reaction. Her reaction's way too complicated. I can feel it, but it's on 2s. I don't know why I kept animating things on 2s like an idiot. You don't need to. 4s works just well enough. She's like, oh boy, I got him. It's a good animation. It's just unnecessarily, and I didn't pull it off as well. That's something I've always been concerned about that I do, is that I try to do the best I can, and I aim for a level of fidelity that I can't actually reach. And so the fact that there's certain things I don't know how to do sort of damage it in the end. That's a weird transition right there. You see her head morphs or something. That's not good. But that's the end of old URSHIFU. Then we have the outro here. I've only done 2 full animations, but already I sort of want to include my little icon in all of those because it's just funny to me. It's like a branding thing. But this holds for like, there's nothing happens here. It just holds for a very long time. This background took a very long time to do. It sort of looks like it's 3D, but it's just like me doing like rectangle selections on a perspective background. Because if you do a rectangle selection in Psy on a perspective background, it will select in perspective, if that makes any sense. And then I just put gradients over things. Because you can make things look like weird 3D, sort of like low, simple 3D by just putting gradients on them. Because that's all 3D is. And there's adding stuff there and a bunch of Pokeballs, but that's the URSHIFU animation. It goes on to 93 actually. No, that's just where I'm doing well, it actually does. But that's it. That's 3 months of work over a joke about how a girl collected a harem of sexy male Pokemon. What I sort of was afraid of happened to where I think most people didn't sort of get what I was making fun of. Or they did, and they were just like, that's a weird sort of thing to think about. But I mean, that's what my humor is, unfortunately, sometimes, is that I do a lot of like sort of certain types of content for people, but I don't really take it too seriously myself. It's just like, this is a commission, you know, I'm just going to earn money off this. And I'm not too concerned, or I don't hold it to like some higher standard or whatever, but I like to make fun of it. I don't see value in treating things like really seriously. It's not my interest, you could say. But making these kinds of jokes is it's funny to me. It's funny to think of a female trainer who has gone around and collected all of the very sort of obviously pushed Pokemon and makes them wear like weird outfits, and there's no explanation of like how she's able to do this or why they listen to her. We're just sort of doing universe logic, or why they have bulges, you know. It could be a sock shoved down in there. That's a joke I wanted to work in, that all of the Pokemon sort of like all their bulges was actually just socks or something like that, but I couldn't work it in there. I didn't really try, to be honest, because I was just, again, I blew through the storyboard too quickly without really thinking about what I was doing. And in hindsight now, I realized I spent a very long amount of time sort of doing one joke. And that's not really how internet animation is supposed to do. It's supposed to be sort of like more fast-paced, more jokey, you know, for certain audiences, I guess. It's more true than others. But for future animations, I don't think I'll be doing just one joke or whatever. The Guinevere animation was one joke, and entirely one joke. But it was shorter, it was more to the point, and it had excellent subversion in it. Because I think most people really like that one, because it was... We've all seen Guinevere cheesecake before. And there was a very obvious sort of twist to that I think a lot of people honestly did not expect, you know. I think there was a lot of people expecting that there would be a type of subversion, but not necessarily big giant girl toes, big goddess toes. Don't think people were expecting that. Here it's sort of, I don't know, I think people were like, oh yeah, I can see that. And then it continues to go on. It's like, yeah. You know, it's funny. I think it's well done. You know, not to jerk myself off a lot, but you know, I look at a lot of the stuff I did and I see problems with it, but it's like, you know, a lot of it's frame to frame animation, and you don't see that a lot. It looks cool to me, you know. But in the future, I'll definitely tackle other things. Yeah, I guess I'll wrap this up now because I'm just trailing on like an idiot. But to anyone who has seen the animation, they liked it, and, you know, shared it to anybody, thanks. You know, that's really helpful to me. If you haven't seen the animation, well, you basically had the entire plot of it explained to you, so you might as well go watch it, I guess. I just wanted to put something out here sort of quick, even though this is probably an hour long. I don't know how I've been talking. My voice really hurts, but hopefully you're excited for more stuff. You're looking forward to it. You think I can provide some more stuff that you might like. And that's what I'm aiming to do. I'm aiming to just sort of do interesting, funny things. And hopefully I can get some support on that and good feedback. And, you know, we can just make stupid shit on the internet together. Anyways, I'll be going now, guys. Gonna go rest my fucking voice. See y'all later.